How delicious do all those tomatoes look? Guten gardening, everybody. Well, it is crazy to me that we're already in mid-September. It seems like the growing season here in Zone 5, Wisconsin just got started. But you know, this time of year means that we're getting really close to the harvest of some of the vegetables that take a good bit longer. Those 110 day vegetables like our sweet potatoes and some of our winter squash. And this time of year also means that the weather is finally starting to cool down. We've actually had a couple of really nice rains over the last week and a half, which has been phenomenal. It also means that some of our plants are starting to die back. So we're seeing that fullness of the summer disappear a little bit, but there's plenty out here that we need to harvest. And so today I'm going to take you on a little bit of a tour so you can see what's still growing in our Zone 5 garden here in September. And also we've got plenty out here again, as usual, to get harvested. So let's get started with our tour. The first place I want to start is here in our front garden space where we just did a nice fingerling potato harvest, but where we still have a bunch more growing. One of the things I'm going to be harvesting today is a few of our California Wonder bell peppers. Now, California Wonder bell peppers are a pretty popular brand, and I think that's probably because they grow so well, and they definitely grow well here in Zone 5. The ones that I'm harvesting today, and I'm not harvesting all of them, but you can see these plants are actually quite loaded down. The size of the peppers on here, really nice, but some of the ones that have already started to ripen up, they're turning red, and some of them aren't all the way red, but I would say that these peppers are a little bit late for us in terms of turning red, and part of the reason for that, I think, is again that difficulty, that hot summer that we had. I read that this was the hottest summer on record. Let me know if you saw something similar in your area. You know, one of the nice things is we do still have a decent amount of time, hopefully before that first frost, about another month or so on average, although with the weather these days, you never really know. So I should have plenty of nice warm days left to still get these to ripen up. Now, right beside these peppers, I've got our sweet potatoes, and these are a bush variety of sweet potatoes. These have been in the ground for about 90 days, and they're looking pretty good. I would say we're another couple of weeks away from that harvest. On the other side of those sweet potatoes, we have some more sweet potatoes, these in our green stalk vertical garden. And there are 5 different varieties of sweet potatoes in here. Earlier this season when I came out to water, actually after we got back from our last vacation trip, I did notice a couple of voles in here, and I noticed it because as I started to water, a couple of them popped out. I think I got those all cleared out before the sweet potatoes had developed, so hopefully that's going to prevent some vole damage in these sweet potatoes. But these are, again, a couple of weeks away from harvest. Now, I harvested most of the eggplant out of here that were ready about a week ago. I'm going to see if there's anything else in here that's ready. I would say our eggplant have been doing pretty well this season, regardless of the weather. But right next door, we've got some tomatoes, and this bed, especially because we left, suffered from a bit of a problem. So the tomatoes we have growing in here are Roma tomatoes. They're great for making sauces. But early on in the season, especially because we weren't here, there was a 2 vacation period where we missed about 21 days of growing, and we didn't have a lot of rain during that time. What we were noticing was a decent amount of blossom end rot, and I think you'll see that with a couple of the other tomatoes that we have growing here. So what we did is we came back, we pulled the ones off with blossom end rot, and then we just made sure we were more consistent in watering. And I know a lot of times the tendency when you see blossom end rot is to try to put eggshells in, powderized eggshells, or to add Tums. I've seen a lot of different suggestions about that, but really the primary reason you see blossom end rot from our experience, and certainly from what we've read, is a lack of consistent watering, because there may be plenty of calcium in the soil, which is that deficiency is what usually causes the blossom end rot. But if you're not consistently watering, they're not going to be able to take that calcium in anyway. So what we've noticed is the primary cause for our blossom end rot in our soil here is a lack of consistent deep watering. So once we came back and we started watering more consistently, we started seeing that blossom end rot disappear, and now we've got some really nice Roma tomatoes to harvest. Now, to be fair, the tomatoes have been pretty late for us this season. I've heard a lot of people share the same experience. But also in this bed, we have a couple of onions. You can tell they're there by the the white covering on them. A couple of onions that came back volunteered this second year, which meant that they were going to go to seed. And what we did was to come out as soon as those flowers blossomed, and I really love an onion flower. I think they're absolutely stunning. But as soon as they blossomed fully, we came and covered them, in this case with a white row covering, just something to keep the seeds from falling out, because we collect the seeds from the onions in our garden and we plant them again the second year. And this is an easy way to preserve the seeds so that whenever all's said and done, you can just pop the top of the flower off, and then shake a little bit and the seeds fall right into that netting. And so you can collect the seeds very easily, and one onion plant can create hundreds of seeds that you can plant the following season. Now, I skipped over this green stalk intentionally because I wanted to show you the onion seeds first, but also we had some radishes in here that went to seed. It was way too hot for them, but now's the time. They've dried out pretty well. I'm gonna go ahead and pull these radish plants out here, and I'm gonna be able to get in here and harvest these seeds. And it's pretty cool to see. It's a really big pod, but it's got 3 or 4 seeds in here, and we can plant those next season. And one of the other reasons why I want to get these out of there and harvest these seeds now is because it is fall, and so we're going to try to plant some spinach, some other quick growing vegetables in here, maybe even some more radishes. So we should still have just about enough time before the cold weather sets in to get another harvest. Now, as I come around from that front garden space and start to head down the side of our house where we have some of our sweet potatoes and potatoes planted, I've also got another green stalk here. The top has gone to seed. These are more radishes that we planted earlier in the season, but below that we have a ton of really nice lettuce, Swiss chard, kale. There's a whole bunch growing in this one, and it's ready to be harvested as well. So I'm going to be harvesting mostly the things that I need to bring inside right away today, but a lot of this will be harvested and put up. The lettuce itself will be eaten fresh, but the kale, etc., that's going to be put up and frozen for later during the winter. If you didn't see our peach video, our peach tree is definitely losing its leaves now, but our harvest, our first ever harvest, was really nice. And we didn't show you much in the way of grapes in terms of harvesting because most of those don't make it inside, but we had a lot of grapes this year and had a lot of fun eating them. So that's one thing that you have to understand. We don't show everything here. There's some things I really wish we could show. We just don't always have the time. That being said, right beside me here is a 32-foot long raised bed, half of which is potatoes, the other half is sweet potatoes. And it looks like to me that this is still a couple of weeks away. We've got some really nice green growth still happening here. And so this is going to be a later season harvest. And our sweet potatoes, we've got a ways to go on those. We're going to try to hold off on harvesting our sweet potatoes as long as we can in this bed this season. Now, just like last year, we did decide to grow some tomatoes at the different stakes here along this bed, and some of them are definitely ready to harvest. We got a couple of different varieties in here. This first one I'm going to show you is an old German tomato, and I think it has a really cool looking exterior. It's a really delicious tomato, I know that. And as I said, everything is late, so we still got plenty of green tomatoes on here along with some of these that are ripe. Now, sadly, whatever label I put by this one has been lost. We got some nice little tomatoes here. And these white cherry tomatoes behind me, I've talked about before. Beautiful color, beautiful taste. If you can get yourself some of these seeds, I'm going to be harvesting a bunch of these, but I would highly recommend it. Yeah, they're phenomenal. All right, let's take a little bit of a borage break. If you didn't watch our video where we talked about some plants that you plant one time and you never have to plant them again, you should check out borage. It is a plant that tastes like cucumbers. It's great for attracting pollinators. It's a beautiful flower, and the taste is just like cucumber. Oh, it is exceptional. It's like the main plant that is so aggressive and spreading everywhere that I really don't mind. All right, check out this Amana tomato I planted right here at the corner. It was just an extra tomato plant that we had growing. Take a look at what it gave me. An absolutely stunning, this is an orange tomato, stunning orange tomato. These are gonna be so good. And there's a couple more on here that look like they're about ready. And what I can do is, this one's not quite ripe yet. I'll just let this one ripen inside. Now, I mentioned that at this time of the year, some of our plants are dying back. I mean, there are some that are still going strong. Like I said earlier, our eggplant, which are right here. I've still got plenty of small eggplants and a couple that are ready to be harvested. I'm gonna get out of here. But our eggplant is still growing strong. Our cucumbers are starting to look a little worse for the wear. The plants themselves are dying back pretty good at this point. It's our tomatoes that are really starting to see a lot of dying back here in our main garden space, but it's just opened up the tomatoes that are already ripe so we can get in here and harvest. And there are so many cherry tomatoes ready to be harvested here. I think I can come out here, probably spend a couple of hours just harvesting the cherry tomatoes. And these are volunteers. These are volunteer cherry tomatoes, not ones that we intentionally planted, although I did move them to the spot where they are, but they are just exploding with tomatoes for us to pick. And that's definitely something that I love, because those volunteer tomatoes often produce better than the tomato plants that you actually go out and either intentionally plant or even buy and plant. If you've experienced that before, where your volunteer tomatoes were the best producers of all your tomatoes, let us know in the comments. One of the vegetables that we've struggled with the last couple of years, and we didn't struggle our first year, so this is kind of strange to me. I'm not exactly sure what's going on, but our Brussels sprouts are finally starting to take off a little bit, and we're seeing some sprouts on the stem. And it was a long season of not a lot of growth for these. And so I don't know if it was the excessive heat. I've looked at other people's gardens. I've seen some great production here. So we've got to figure Brussels sprouts out for sure. Now, as I get to the end of the main garden space at the back of our property, I'll tell you one area we have not struggled is our summer squash grown in quail waste. These have been growing all season long, producing for months now. And we've still got some massive ones on here. Now, I mentioned that some of our crops, the longer term crops, are getting closer to harvest. Here we have some potatoes grown in cardboard boxes, in buckets. Those are going to be fun to unearth. And we just released a video where we did an experiment where we removed flowers from some of our potatoes and left flowers on. And we got some results, and we wanted to share that with you. So if you haven't checked out that video, definitely do so. That was a very enjoyable harvest. So behind me now is our main garden space, and on this side, we have a couple of our raised beds. And these raised beds contain some of what we haven't yet harvested from our broccoli crop, some of our kale that we've been growing again in raised beds, and here are our fall potatoes. This is our really late planting of potatoes. We're gonna see if we get much of any harvest from here. I'm excited. They look really healthy and they look like they're about to go to flower. And directly opposite of that, all along here, this is compost row, a really great growing area where we're growing in our compost. We did a hugelkultur type setup where we reloaded up these beds after we took all the compost out of them, and we grew on top of them once again right away. And we're getting some pretty good production out of these, including some really nice winter squash like our delicata squash, which is absolutely one of my favorites. It's right up there alongside the Canada crookneck squash. We also have some butternut squash growing in here, along with some of our eggplant and peppers. Basically, what I'm trying to say is when you have a very small garden space, it's important to try to use as much as possible. And growing on top of your compost could be a great option for you. Now, this is exciting. Right behind me, we have our Magic Molly potatoes that we planted in here, grown in some of these 50-gallon food safe containers cut in half. And they are dying back nicely. So that's going to be one of our next potato harvests. So right down from compost row, we have a couple of our long raised beds. These are 12-foot long raised beds with built-in trellising. I built those about 2 years ago. And in here we have some of our Roma tomatoes growing, a couple of different varieties of tomatoes actually. And in this first bed, we've got some sweet potatoes. We enjoyed that harvest last season, so we put sweet potatoes in here again this season. And then in the next bed down, we have more tomatoes. And we also put some eggplants, because I read that eggplant and tomato grow well together, but unfortunately, we didn't do so well with the eggplant in that bed. Now down at the end with some of those Roma tomatoes, you really see what I'm talking about blossom end rot, because that bed, especially the one at the very end, is where we struggled the most with blossom end rot. But that being said, we still have quite a few really nice tomatoes to harvest out of here. And this one spot in the bed here looks like a treasure trove of red. So I'm gonna get these harvested. How delicious do all those tomatoes look? Now there's a lot more that I could show you out here, but I'm gonna end on what is for us a really cool note. You see this? Do you know what that is? That is a Hosui Asian pear. And if you've never had an Asian pear before, they're to me, they're a cross between an apple and a pear. And for 2 years, we've gotten no fruit off of this tree. But this year, we've got 4 or 5 of these. And this one in particular is ready to be harvested. It looks magnificent. But I'm not going to do the harvesting of this one. I'm going to leave that up to my family because I want them to taste this. This is twice the size of the one that we got our first season of growing. And I just can't wait to try it out. Well, folks, we have a lot still growing here, even in mid-September in Zone 5, Wisconsin. And there's a lot of work to do out here, but it's a good work. It's a valuable work. And I can't wait to get out here and keep doing it. If you enjoyed today's video, don't forget to give us a like. Leave us a comment. Remember to share and subscribe. And most importantly,